So it's preparing to live stream. And it's 1:00 now. So we should be showing up momentarily to Facebook Live.
Good.
And I think, we're on, which is great. Yeah, it was quick. So it's 1:00. I'm just going to pause for a second or two. We have someone who does our editing of the video, and we want to give her, Lori King, we want to give her a little bit of space so she can do this. Okay. All right. And then we already have some comments on Facebook. My goodness. Before I even say anything.
Well, we like that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, hi, everyone. I'm Glenda Carroll. If you've been watching this Facebook Saturday Live series, you know who I am. But I represent Mystery Writers of America, Northern California chapter. And as I mentioned, this is Facebook Saturday Live. And this is a place where authors, normally local authors, but today it's different, where authors give us a sort of a short, focused talk on the craft of crime. Today's program is called In Short Order. And if you've seen any of the publicity, this is your masterclass on short story writing, from the beginning, coming up with the idea, to the end of where you can get it published. And we have two great speakers with us today. They're known for their short story writing. One is our own Vinnie Hansen, and she's a member of the NorCal MWA chapter. And the other, who is a short story writer extraordinaire, John Floyd. And he's joining us from much warmer than Northern California, Mississippi. So, and he basically knows everything there is to do about the short story, the short fiction form. Now, normally I don't read bios, but I want to today so you can hear a little bit about both of these people. So I'm going to read primarily this. NorCal MWA member Vinnie Hansen is the author of the Carol Savallo mystery series. The standalone novels, One Gun and Low Start Street, as well as over 50, did you get that? 50 published short stories. Vinnie and John know each other. They have appeared together in a mystery weekly in 2021, and he was a judge for Hook, Line, and Sinker, the Guppy's latest anthology, which includes Vinnie's story, Perfect Partner. Like John, Vinnie has been published in Akashic Books' famous noir series, Santa Cruz Noir. So John, as I just mentioned, is from Mississippi, where earlier in the week when we met and we had a run through, it was 80 degrees. Today it's a little cooler. He said it's in the 70s.
Right.
Anyway, he's appeared in more than 350 different publications, including Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine, Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine, Strand Magazine, the Saturday Evening Post, and 4 editions of Otto Penzler's Best Mysteries of the Year anthologies. A former Air Force captain and IBM systems engineer, John is an Edgar finalist, a Shamus Award winner, a 5-time Derringer Award winner, and the author of 9 books. So he's busy. He is also the 2018 recipient of the Short Mystery Fiction Society Lifetime Achievement Award. So these people have street cred, okay? And while they're talking, if you have a question or a thought, drop it into the Facebook comment section, and we'll get to those towards the end of they're going to discuss things together. So we'll get to the end of that. If something is truly, truly, truly pressing that you need an answer to now, say something. I'll try to break into them, but I would prefer just to hold it off so they can get through what they want to get through. Now I'm going to give this over to Vinnie, and let's see here, and I will disappear And Vinnie, it's all yours. Have fun.
All right. Thank you, Glenda, so much. And thanks too to John for joining me. I feel like we have so much to cover that I just want to get this party started just right off. How do we start that short story? And really, I have two basic things from which I draw. One is life, my own life, traumas and dramas that I've experienced and can exaggerate and twist and turn, and the lives around me. Some people think I'm quiet, but I'm really just a notorious eavesdropper. So there's life. And the second source, probably a more practical one, is to look at themes and prompts and even guidelines for certain publications. But I'm going to turn this over to our real expert, John, to find out how he gets started. I know he's much more organized in his approach than I am. He's an outliner, one of those. So, John, what do you go to start a story?
Well, I am an outliner. I'm not sure my life has been interesting enough for me to use that as a basis for any of my stories, but I do like what I do when I start a story is I think first of the plot, and I think I'm unusual probably in that sense. I know an awful lot of people, an awful lot of writers I know start with maybe a setting and build a story around that, or maybe the theme. If they're writing for an anthology, let's say, they'll start with a theme. Most writers I know start with characters, and then they give those characters a story to perform in, and those interesting characters. But what I have to start with is the plot. I have to start with a story and then put people in it to make the story happen. Is what it amounts to, and I come up with hopefully an effective paragraph or a line to begin that story. But I do have to outline, and I'm not saying that's what I would want to do. I think I envy the folks who start with a blank page and just start writing, but I can't do that. I have to have that structure, that safety net, I guess, a blueprint before I start. So I spend a while thinking about it before I ever start writing. And ideas, as far as coming up with ideas, gosh, ideas are everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think you just have to think of a situation and say, what if such and such happened, and just let your imagination go. But Vinnie, you use first lines, you said, as a prompt sometimes to begin the story, right?
Yeah, sometimes I just start with the first line. For example, in the anthology, the one where we were published together, Mystery Weekly, and this story, Try Again. I was writing to a prompt actually for a BoucherCon anthology. It was the one for New Orleans, and the New Orleans BoucherCon got canceled. So they had chosen that theme when they rescheduled it, of sort of a second try or trying again. And that prompt of a second try just immediately made me think of a second shot. And boom, just like that, I not only had the first line of that story, which is all I wanted was another shot, but I also had the last line of the story in my head, which was all I wanted now was a second shot, a good shot. And I thought, well, how do I get from the first line to that last line?
Right.
And I also liked it because the two lines made a nice frame for that particular story. So yeah, sometimes I just start with a first line. Another example of that is I went to the California Crime Writers Convention, and they have a contest of coming up with what you feel is just a good first line. And so I like short, punchy first lines. I don't like lines that go on and on for half a paragraph. And so I came up with this this line. I didn't win the contest, but I liked my first line. Ray Ray's feet swept onto Opismo Beach without the rest of him. And okay, how did those feet get there? I guess that starts to suggest plot. But I just started with the first line and knew after I had done that line for that contest that I wanted to write a story about, well, how did those severed feet wash up on Opismo Beach? And I did write the story. So, but I noticed, John, you seem to like the short, punchy first line too. Just looking at a couple of examples from your stories. This is flu season with 350 under your belt. I don't know if you remember. But this was your first line. If he's sick, O'Neill said, maybe he'll die on his own. Do you remember coming up with that?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Now, you had an outline first before you came up with that? Or
Well, I outline all of them before I start. I have to do that.
Uh-huh. Here's another first line of yours. He's dead, Nicole Finney said. Teary-eyed, she led officers Payne and Tyler down a dim hallway. So is that your preference to start with something short and punchy? Do you think that that's the advice you would give to our listeners?
I don't think it works every time, but yeah, I think that is. I think you need to start. I think you need to start with something happening, and sometimes dialogue is a way to do that. You know, it's showing and not telling when you use dialogue. And that one, gosh, I've forgotten about that one from flu season. But sure enough, if starting by saying, you know, he's sick, maybe he'll just die on his own, implies that maybe this guy's planning to help him along if that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And and I think anything that can help get the reader into the story, I think is a really neat thing. I heard someone say once that a writing teacher told a writing student, you know, your story would have been fine, except that you started your story on page 7. And so the student said, no, I didn't. I started on page 1, see? And he said, no, you started typing on page 1. You started your story on page 7. And sure enough, there was, when it starts, I don't know, when your story starts with description and exposition and those kinds of things, that used to be fine to do that for short stories and novels too. And I don't think you can do that today.
I agree. Starting in medias res, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, medias res, which literally means in the middle of the thing, has been thrown out there as good advice. And I think it's kind of good advice. I know when I was writing Perfect Partner for the anthology you judged, Hook, Line, and Sinker, the Guppies anthology.
Right.
The story had to have a scheme or a scam or a grift in it. And I didn't really know any scams or grifts, so I had to delve into some research and come up with a scam to become the plot for my story. But I didn't want to start there. I wanted to start in medias res, so I started with the line, money. He's going to ask for money or something like that. So the grift is already going when I started the story.
Right.
But I want to read a bit from Doug Allen's post on Art Taylor's The First Two Pages.
Yeah.
And if we have any listeners who are newbies to writing short stories, or even experienced people who want to see what other authors have done, I really recommend his site, The First Two Pages. This was a post by Doug Allen, and here I'm just going to read from it because I think it's very good. A century and more ago, Poe said a story should begin a moment before the most important instant in a character's life, or words to that effect. Actually, that's still pretty good advice. Poe didn't need 2 pages to kick off Amontillado or The House of Usher. So let's refocus a moment, forget the first 2 pages and consider snaring the reader with the first two paragraphs.
Yep.
And then he goes on, I'm going to read this example for anybody out there who would like a concrete example. For example, consider engaging the reader in conversation. If the stranger sitting next to you at a bar starts talking to you, you listen, if only to be polite. Writers have that option too. Here's the opening paragraph from a Derringer Award winner called Famous Last Words. And this is a fabulous opening. Have you ever wondered what you would say if you knew that the next thing you said would be the last thing you ever said? Would you try to justify your life or say, I love you, or goodbye, or try to pray? Could you even assemble a coherent sentence? I couldn't, and I had my chance. I just think that's marvelous.
I like
and
that.
I think that's a great tip. I think I'm going to go try it on a story. Just start with a conversational tidbit like that.
I know. I think that's neat. I think another thing I've heard, and I'm not sure I always do this. I hear advice, but I'm not sure I always follow it. Is to introduce the person early in the story. You introduce the protagonist, and you tell the reader what's. In fact, I think it was the 5 W's. It was who, what, why, where, when. If you can do those things fairly early in the story, that's really a good thing, with a short story especially. And I remember the first line, or I think I remember the first line from Old Man in the Sea, Ernest Hemingway, which was it was a novella, I guess, but it said he was an old man who fished in a skiff in the Gulf Stream and had been 84 days now since taking a fish. And in that first line, not the first paragraph, but the first line, he told all those things. He said who, he said what he was doing, why he was doing it, because he was a fisherman. He said where it was. He even said when, because he didn't specify a time. And when you do that, you assume it's present day, which that was back in the early 50s. So he did everything in that first line. That's probably something to strive for, which I've never done, but it's a good thing to do in an opening of a short story, if you can start off doing those kinds of things. And I've heard that the first person mentioned needs to be the protagonist, that you get the reader's mind, into the story by doing that if you can. And I've seen exceptions to that too, but still a good rule to try to do that kind of thing.
And you were mentioning to me earlier too that you wanted to talk a bit about point of view, because it's such an important element in how we proceed with the story. I know for myself, when I take those stories that are kind of coming out of my life, whether it's my life directly or things that my friends have told me, or experiences of my brothers and sisters that I steal, a lot of times a character in those stories is going to resemble myself, and I gravitate toward the ease of first person, because
Right.
a character is going to be a bit like myself, and it's easy. But I know when I'm tackling a more distant story, like when I'm writing to a prompt for one of the anthologies that's calling for a submission, when I'm writing to a prompt, I usually go with third person. And I think with mystery, for me, third person is a little easier, because you have to have that twist, or you have to have that irony. And it's kind of hard to develop either when the person telling the story is the source of knowledge. Does that make sense to you?
It does make sense.
If they know everything that's happening, and they kind of have to be the narrator, then how do we have the surprise coming, or how do we have the twist happen? What do you think about, what would you say to our listeners about point of view? And
well, it does depend a little bit on the story. Sometimes suspense, it seems third person lends itself better sometimes to suspense, because you can get into someone else's head beside, if you're first person, obviously you're looking at it from one person's point of view. But if it's third person, then you can have, let's say you can have somebody go to, when he leaves his girlfriend's apartment, when the protagonist leaves, then the girlfriend can maybe call someone on the phone and say, well, he just left, he's going around the corner if you want to, knock in the head now. So sometimes it's a way to build suspense if you use third person, but first person can too. In fact, a lot of mysteries are first person because that way the reader knows something as soon as the protagonist knows it and not before, you know what I mean? So it just kind of depends. I know point of view seems to be something that really is confusing to a lot of beginning writers, or maybe it's not confusing and it should be. I mean, they don't know yet that it's important to do that the right way. And really some stories, I found myself writing some stories in third person, what's called third person detached point of view, where you can't get into anyone's head because there maybe is a surprise ending. And if you could get into what people were thinking. Remember The Lottery? Shirley Jackson wrote that story in a detached point of view, because if she hadn't, there would have been no surprise at the end. So it's really funny how point of view can really help you put together a story. And something I've always found fascinating is someone might say, well, who should really tell the story? I don't know who to pick to really tell my story. It should be the point of view character. And the definition of that seems to be that it's the person who's maybe will be more influenced, more impacted by what happens than anybody else should be the person to tell the story. So in Shane, the Western, where it's the point of view character is not the main character. He's the little boy who learns from the main character. Right. Same thing in To Kill a Mockingbird. Atticus Finch, probably one of the most famous fictional characters ever, but he wasn't the point of view character. It was his daughter, because she could learn a life lesson from what happened in the stuff. I think that's probably the way to do that. And I've found myself starting a story over again with either a different point of view or a different point of view character sometimes because of that.
Because you have a realization. Another example of that would be The Great Gatsby, because Nick Carraway is kind of a background character, but he's the one who has really changed because of what happens. So I want to talk just a bit about how I wrote my very first short story, which was first published short story, which was in college, especially for any listeners who are stuck or don't know how to begin. I received the advice, well, pick a short story that you really like. And so I happen to really like a short story. It's not a mystery short story, but it's called City Boy, and it's by Leonard Michaels. And the professor told me, well, just take the structure right down to the minute syntax and start plugging in your own words. And so City Boy, actually, let me find my story here. City Boy starts, Philip, she said, this is crazy. So again, there we have that punchy opening with dialogue. Okay, so his is titled City Boy. Mine is titled Country Girl. He says, Philip, she said, this is crazy. My character says, I'm going to kill you, he said. And I just continued that pattern for a bit. The next sentence in Leonard Michaels' story is a simple declarative sentence. I didn't agree or disagree. And so I made a simple declarative sentence. I dodged the daily laugh. And I just kept following that. And pretty soon I was often writing the story. And it served me well, because that became my first publication many years ago.
Where was it published?
It was published in San Francisco State University's literary magazine of their English department.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of fantastic, because I was published every quarter I was there, and it left me with this big head that I was going to go out and write the world's greatest novel. It kind of made me too big-headed, but we should probably get on with, okay, we point of view, come up with a first line. Now you're an outliner, so you've already kind of thought about how your story should go. So let's go to what are some of the other things you're thinking about as you get into the grist of your story or the heart of your story? You even mentioned that sometimes you stop and go back and put it in a different point of view. How do you proceed? Got a general idea, point of view? What now?
Well, what I do when I put together a story, I guess, is I try to follow the old, I don't know, the old formula. If there is a formula, it's problem resolution and a problem complication and resolution. So as soon as I come up with maybe a beginning, I try to make something really bad happen to the protagonist as soon as possible, right? And it's get the man up the tree. I'll throw rocks at him while he's there and get him down. Seems to be but don't just get him up there and get him down safely. You don't make it really hard for him while he's there, and that's what good stories. I think that's what good stories do. So I spend a lot of time on the complication, on trying to make things worse before they get better. And I have to know all that. I have to have the beginning, middle, and end in my mind before I start writing. It might change. Hopefully it changes for the better while I write, but still I have to have that before I start.
Sorry, not to.
I just I envy. I said it before. I envy people who can just start writing and just kind of see where it goes. If I did that, I'd waste a ton of time. I'd never get to the end problem.
Well, I do waste a ton of time. That's why I have 50 published short stories and you have 350.
No.
But that series of unfortunate events, not just one complication, but just keep
Right.
like, what's the next bad thing that could happen to this person?
Right.
I can't believe how fast this time goes, but I want to talk about a structure that comes from the great Art Taylor. And it's called his 6-sentence story. So it's kind of an outline for how to construct a story with just 6 sentences, which can later be filled out, elaborated upon, etc. So he has number 1, character. And you had talked earlier about characters, very important for you. Introduce the person the story is about. And with the 6-sentence exercise, it would just be 1 sentence to kind of get that done. You were referencing The Old Man and the Sea, so much in that first sentence. So get the character established. The second sentence would be the character's desire. What does this character want? A state of being, a thing, another person, money. What are those driving forces? Sex, money. What is he going after? Action. Sentence 3. Have your character do something to achieve what they want. 4. Conflict. Present some obstacle that stands in the way. There has to be conflict. Conflict, in my opinion, drives story.
Right.
And as you were talking about, that conflict doesn't just have to be one thing. It can keep getting more and more complicated. 5, there needs to be a climax. Is the desire achieved? Is it thwarted? Either one can be okay. We can have a happy ending. We can have a tragic ending. And a resolution. What ultimately happens afterward? Is it happily ever after? Do we have the ironic twist? So to read his example, if you'll bear with me, John, I know I'm hogging a little bit of time here.
That's fine.
So character, he has, in his example, Bernadette was a single mom living with her own nagging mother. What does she want? She wanted to find someone to share her life with, to help her raise her child, and to help her get out from under her mother's constant complaining. What's she going to do about it? Action. Whenever she could, Bernadette went out to bars, looking for that someone special. Now we can already see there might be potential problems or conflict with that. So conflict, but even though her mother said, any Sam, Dick, or Harry will be better than no one, Every guy Bernadette met was a scuzzball. And climax, finally, Bernadette found the Sam of her dreams. Resolution, a nice twist. Hey, Mom, meet Samantha. So the whole story would be Bernadette was a single mom living with her own nagging mother. She wanted to find someone to share her life with, to help her raise her child, and to help her get out from under her mother's constant nagging. When she could, Bernadette went out to bars looking for that special someone. But even though her mother said any Sam, Dick, or Harry will be better than no one, every guy Bernadette met was a scuzzball. Finally, Bernadette found the Sam of her dreams. Mom, meet Samantha. So it's really short, but it can be sprung apart and developed with those elements in place.
Right. But it's still problem, complication, resolution. Those three things have to be there.
Just like I taught in high school, So you were saying that you think a lot of people tuning in would like to hear about the aftermath. You construct a story using art's brilliant advice or outlining or just pantsing your way through it like I do. But we come up with something, then what? Do you want to talk about that?
Then I think you rewrite until you think it's as perfect as it can be, and you send it out into the world and hope, right?
You're so experienced. Do you still have people you go to for critiquing or proofing, or
I don't usually. My wife reads some of my stories and not all of them, and she's found some things and told me to correct them. And believe me, I mind her when she tells me something. But I usually self-edit, and that might be good or bad. I do think it's helpful if you have folks who can critique your story. I just think you have to be really skeptical of criticism. For one thing, if they're your friends, you probably can't believe them because they're going to tell you what you want to hear. If you have an honest group, though, of a critique group, let's say, I think that's a good thing. Or have 4 or 5 folks who you'll trust what they say, and they can read what you wrote. I think that's a good thing, and give you feedback.
Yes, I think that the feedback and polishing is really important. One of my first readers is my husband, but he's brutal. I actually don't know.
That's good.
He's harsh. Yeah, he's a very critical reader. He's not the kind that says, "Oh, honey, this is great."
Good.
And other sources are Sisters in Crime through their various, the Guppies or my local chapter. There are different ways to swap manuscripts.
Good.
I had a live critique group here in town for years and years and years. We kind of fell apart during the pandemic, but I have a drop-in writing group that I go to, and there are people there that will often swap stories with me for the proofreading.
Good.
But once we have it spit polished, I think markets was what I'd like to kind of run by you. For people out there who maybe have a story that they've polished or maybe worked on forever, but they're looking for a market.
Yeah.
What's your advice on that?
Well, these days, in the old days, it was, I used to tell folks to buy a book called Novel and Short Story Writers Market, and it had lists of hundreds of places where you could send what you write. And it could tell you what the editors wanted, those kinds of things. These days with the internet, you really don't need that. I do think you need to search the internet, do a Google search on the kind of story that you wrote. Let's say mystery story markets, romance story markets, those kinds of things, and see what comes up there. That's a really good thing, I think, to do. Researching the markets is really important before you send your stories out if you're brand new. And keeping up with those markets is something you have to do even if you're not new. You have to make sure you find as good a place to send your story as you can. Improve your odds as much as you can when you send when you send these stories out. So I try to spend a good bit of time on the marketing side.
Mhm. And one thing that has really helped me is being a member of the Short Mystery Fiction
Mhm.
Society, because our fearless leader, Kevin, is always posting lists of who's looking for what. And that has helped me enormously to take my stories and send them to someone who's looking for that kind of thing, or create something specifically for that market. So that's really helped me tremendously. I'd say there's only one caveat I would say about writing for a particular, very particular market or theme or prompt. And that is if the prompt or theme is really particular, like we had one that was looking for a story. It had to involve an orchestra, it had to be in the mystery genre, and it had to have some erotica. And I wrote that story and I did not get accepted. And the prompt was so specific, it's like, well, now what do I do with it?
Right.
Who's going to want this?
It's true.
You know, on the other hand, when I've written for less specific prompts, when I haven't been accepted, I've been able to turn around and market them or sell them elsewhere. For example, I wrote the one for the BoucherCon anthology for the New Orleans BoucherCon. Didn't get in that, not surprised. It's a really, really competitive submission. But I turned around and sold it to Mystery Weekly.
Good.
And the same thing happened when I wrote for the BoucherCon Minnesota. I again did not get into that anthology. I thought my story was great, but I didn't get into the anthology. But I turned around again and I sold the story to, I think again it was Mystery Weekly, which I happen to think is a great venue.
It is.
They
It is.
accept fast, they pay well. Well, to me, they pay well, and it's a really great magazine, just chock a block full of stories without a bunch of ads or glitz or anything. Do you have a favorite market yourself, or?
Well, yeah, I do. If you've been writing a while, you have some markets that you like to send stories to. I write mostly mystery short stories. So the places I send to are Alfred Hitchcock, Ellery Queen, Strand Magazine, Mystery Magazine, Black Cat Mystery Magazine, Sherlock Holmes Mystery. There are a few that that I always try to send stories to. But I'll tell you, you made a good point about writing to a market. If you write to a really tailored, you write a really tailored story, tailored and targeted to a certain market, it makes it a little harder. And so I tell folks especially folks who are new to writing, I think the best thing to do is write a story. Just write your story, and don't worry about a market until you're through the story. Then try to find a market that your story fits, rather than try to tailor a story to a market, at least until you have a good bit of experience in writing. I think that probably works out better. And I also try to tell folks to don't shy away from the top markets either. Send something, at least now and then, to the best markets and see what happens. I mean, why not do that?
Well, the why not for some people for a long time has been that Alfred Hitchcock magazine and Ellery Queen were so dilatory in their responses. So you would have a story that's tied up for a year or more.
Yep.
But I haven't found that lately with Ellery Queen. They've been
Right.
really quick to reject me.
Well,
So,
I've been a lot more successful at Alfred Hitchcock than Ellery Queen too. Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine takes a long time to respond, and you have to know that going in. A good thing to do on that is if you have several stories, send one to Hitchcock and then wait a couple of months and send them another one. And when you send these things off, then forget about them. You submit it, forget about it. Don't look at it again until you hear something back, right? But
Right.
Ellery Queen does respond pretty quickly. There's some who take a long, long time to respond. Some magazines have a policy where they don't respond unless it's an acceptance. Strand Magazine is one of those. Woman's World is one of those. But that's not going to stop me from submitting stories to them. So you just have to try to figure out what market is best for your story, send it out, and then write the next story. Forget about it and write another one. But keep track, have a way of keeping track of where you send everything, so you can inquire after a certain length of time, let's say, if you hadn't heard back, so forth.
Mm-hmm. Right. Do you consider pay at all when you're thinking about where you're submitting to?
I do consider that. There are a few editors that I still send stories to who don't pay. Joe DeMarco is one at Mysterically,
Mm-hmm.
and Lori Ham at Kings River Life. I just I like those editors, and I send them something now and then.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I like to be paid for what I write. I think everybody does, and some places pay better than others, and that it makes a difference. And
Right,
you decide to
because
send.
of you, oh, excuse me, because of you, I just sent something off to Women's World because their pay is fabulous. So I thought, why not? I have this little story, I'll diddle with it and see if it can't fit into their,
Right.
it's like a riddle that the reader's supposed to solve.
It's an interactive mystery, which is a little different. They started off with traditional mysteries years ago. And then they made the decision, I think it was 2004, to go to interactive mysteries where you have a puzzle. You write a puzzle and ask the reader to solve the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good. I've sold 125 stories to Woman's World so far, and it's a different kind of writing, it's a different kind of story, but it's fun. They're very short,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's something that you can do without taking a lot of time, and it does pay a good return. So it's a good market.
Right, I think it's only 600 or 700 words or something like that.
Yeah, 700 words max for the mysteries, and the last 2 dozen mysteries I've sold them have all been 530, 550 words. So it's they pay almost $1 a word, which is a good thing.
I would say that's really good. Um, yes, I'm looking at our clock and we're already at 42 minutes and
Yeah, I wondered if you were ready to take some questions.
oh
Sure.
yes, absolutely.
Sure.
Okay, because we have quite a few. So I'm going to start at the beginning, and this is from M.A. Monin, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Vinnie, this is for you. For Perfect Partner in Hook, Line, and Sinker, did you start with the first line? It's one we can all relate to. So now I want to know what the first line is.
Actually, I have that right here at my fingertips. So
Okay, so why don't you read that, if you don't mind?
well, the first line is actually just money. So I'll read a little bit more than that.
Okay.
Money. He needs money. In another minute, he's going to follow up his In another minute, he's going to follow up his text to me with an ask.
Okay.
And so that's the beginning. Now, I don't outline like John, but I had a general idea of what I wanted to do. I wanted to start in the middle of the action with a youngish woman who's being scammed. And I knew that she had to be vulnerable in a way to be falling victim of this scam. So I already had some ideas about my character. And I knew that I didn't want the story to just be a simple, straightforward scam, but I wanted to have a good twist and have her turn the tables on the person scamming her. So I had a lot of ideas about the kind of story I wanted to write, but I've kind of lost track of the question actually, so I hope I'm answering it. Glenda, can you remind me of what the question was?
Sure. Let me go back to it. This is for Perfect Partner. Did you start with the first line?
Yes, I did start with that first line, having my character in the middle of being scammed. But again, it's kind of at the same time that I had an idea of where I wanted the story to go.
Okay. Yeah, John, this is also from M.A. Monin. John, I think I've heard you say a shorter story is more likely to get published. That was several years ago. Do you still find that to be true?
Yeah, I think I remember saying that if you have two stories that are of equal quality, I've found that the shorter the two stories is going to usually be easier to sell. The same thing applies to if you have two stories and they're both of the same quality and one has humor in it and the other one doesn't, the one that has humor in it is going to be easier to sell. And the same thing goes for dialogue. Two stories where everything else is the same and one has a lot of dialogue and one does not, the one with a lot of dialogue will be easier to sell. So a pretty short story that's humorous and has a lot of dialogue is easier to sell. And that's just the truth. I can't.
That's interesting, really interesting, I think. Yeah. John, this is another one for you, from Robin Stull. She wonders if you wrote any stories while you were on watch during your Air Force years.
No, what happened is I started writing in my 40s. I wish I had started writing early. Almost every writer I know started early, and I did not. I didn't even like English in high school. I like math and science. I don't know what I don't know why I'm doing this. Okay, but it was while I was working for IBM and I was traveling a lot by myself and in the car and in airplanes and airports and started dreaming up these stories that that I started writing. But I have written some stories about those times spent in the Air Force, as all of us do. We mine our past experiences for some of these ideas.
Another one for you, John. This is from Mary Flodden. First of all, she thanks both of you for being here. And she said, beside the obvious, I think of this for both of you, beside the obvious difference of length, how do you approach a short story differently than a novel? And you've both written novels, so you can both respond to this.
Oh, go ahead, Vinnie.
Well, one of the reasons I like short story is that I can usually envision the end, even though I don't outline it like John. I can envision the end and kind of the shape of the thing in my head before I embark. Because I don't outline for my longer works either, I don't necessarily have a sense of the shape of the thing when I start writing. It can take me on really different places and more dead ends and really become frustrating. Short stories to me are much less frustrating. And it's probably because even though I'm not outlining in my head, I do have a sense of the shape of it before I start.
Okay.
John?
Go ahead. I'm sorry to cut you off. Go
No,
ahead.
I was going to say I heard a really negative approach to that one time. That the business about novels or short stories. It said that if you happen to write a novel and it doesn't work, then you spent maybe months and years. With a short story, you've spent several days. That's a negative way to look at that. But it's I do like the instant gratification of writing short and finishing something. I think we were talking about this before we came on the air today. That I just like writing the end, and tomorrow I can write something completely different. And I think that's great. I like that kind of thing.
John, I had asked you earlier if you could do a breakdown of how many words for these, different types of like flash fiction, short story, novella. Could you do that again for our audience?
Well, this is not a global view here, but for the Short Mystery Fiction Society, with some of their awards, what they say is, I believe flash fiction is anything less than 1,000 words. Short stories anything up to 4,000 words. What they call long story is 4,000 to 8,000, if I'm not mistaken. And above that is something they call novelettes, and then getting into novella length. I consider maybe a novella starts with I don't know 20,000 words and up. I think a short story can be anything from gosh, I guess from 0 to about 8,000-9,000 words. Flash fiction, though, usually is considered to be less than. It's usually called short fiction. Is usually anything less than 1,000 words.
Okay, thank you. Vinnie, earlier on, you were talking about critique groups, and Mary Floden asked, what kind of drop-in critique group, online or in person?
Um, I don't know if she's referring to, I mentioned I go to a drop-in writing session. There are many of them, the National Sisters in Crime posts them, but I'm going to one that's from the NorCal chapter of Sisters in Crime. But it's just a place where we drop in and write together during an hour session. And they have them at various times. I go to one at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but they have several of them. But that's just to write. But the people that I've met there are often very open to exchanging manuscripts with me, or even just reading for me because they're wonderful people. Um, so I hope that answers your question.
We have right now two more questions, and one of them is mine. And basically, it's technical, sort of like how you do what you do. When I write a novel, when I write my mysteries, I sometimes do 8 or 9 drafts. Do you do that with your short stories? That's for both of you.
Go ahead, John. Yeah.
For me, it's hard to tell how many drafts I do because I type it into the computer. I never even print them out anymore. And like for my first draft, I guess, sure enough, I do a first draft, but it's pretty rough and it's pretty ugly. And I go back and I kind of use a triage approach, I guess, and I try to correct the worst things first and then get down to the spelling and punctuation and so forth and make several passes until I feel like it's right. And that kind of thing. The writing for me is fairly quick because I spend a while doing this mental outline and deciding what the story's going to be before I ever start writing. The writing itself goes fairly fast, and then the rewriting takes several days before I'm through. But that's my approach.
Vinnie, what about you?
Well, my last novel, I think, was up to version 11C before before it was adequate. So that's really I don't know, 13 drafts. And I do a lot of drafts of short stories too. I start with something, and like John said, the first draft is going to have problems. Uh, I had one that I sent out to somebody, and I realized, well, it was really just a baby. And now, after I got her feedback, it's grown into an adolescent. It's kind of out of control. But I'm going to whip it into a nice adult here soon.
That's great. For both of you, what are you working on now? This is from Robin.
I'm working on another mystery. It's another mystery story, about 3/4 of the way through.
John, do you usually work at one at a time, or do you have more than one going at a time?
I usually work one at a time, but I've got several ideas cooking at the same time.
And for myself, I'm currently working on getting that short story, to grow up. It's almost there. And I have a novel that is finished. It's been through a developmental edit and is currently with a critique partner who is also an author with Mysterio Press. So it's getting there. It's called Crime Writer.
Okay. Actually, 2 more questions. Once I said there's 2 more, they come in. But so I want to get to these before we close. For both of you, from Sherry Held, how long does it take you to write a short story?
Go ahead, Vinnie.
Oh my goodness, that can vary so much. I mean, I've had short stories that have really come and they've been easy, and basically I had the short story first draft in a day, but I've had unwieldy short stories that I've worked on and put aside and come back to. Sometimes they never work out, and I spent days and days and days on them. So it just varies wildly.
Yeah, the same for me. It varies all over the place. For me, it goes anywhere from usually from several days to 2 or 3 weeks is what I spend on a story.
Okay, last question, okay? And for the rest of you, if you have a question that we haven't covered, you can put it in the comment section on Facebook, and I'll ask both of our writers, John and Vinnie, just to go back and review it, and there might be something else you want to say on some of these. But so, last question from Erin Crowley, and this is to both of you. What do you wish you'd known when you first started writing short fiction?
I wish that I had had a better sense of the markets. I guess I wish the internet had been around then with all those guidelines, and I wish I knew about the Short Mystery Fiction Society earlier. So I guess I wish I knew more about markets when I started.
I do
And
too.
John?
I do too. I wish I'd known more about the markets. I didn't really know where to go to learn about them, so it took a while to get familiar with them. But that's the main thing. Nothing came as a terribly big surprise, I think, to me.
Well, folks, all I can do is thank you so much. It's so informative and entertaining. And it's wonderful to learn about your process, how you do what you do, and your suggestions for our audience. So again, a big thank you. To those of you who are out there, as soon as we say goodbye, it takes about 3, maybe to 4 or 5 minutes before this video of this Saturday live shows up on the MWA NorCal website. So we have all of our videos there. I've been doing this for about 2.5 years. So there's tons of video. This will be the most recent. And it'll be there, if you want to check on something, you want to review it, you want to tell somebody about it so they can go see it. So just make sure that you go check it out. And again, if you have any other questions, drop them in the comment section, and John and Vinnie will get back to you. And I want to thank to our guest, John in warm Mississippi, how jealous I am, and Vinnie in cool, are you in Capitola or Santa Cruz?
I'm in Santa Cruz, and actually this room is starting to freeze.
Okay, well, perfect timing. We're leaving in just a minute. So thanks, both of you. This has been a real delight for me, and I'm sure for our viewers. And to the viewers, just thank you for spending part of a Saturday with us.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, and so do our speakers. So with that, we will see you next month, and I wish you all a wonderful week. Bye. Thanks again.
Thanks so much.
Sure.